Hello and welcome. Thank you for watching. I do appreciate it. This is Cooking at Home Like a Chef, Episode 4, Stuffed Pork. In the first two episodes of this series, we covered the technical stuff for slicing, dicing, cutting, proportioning, that kind of thing. A bit dull, I admit, but necessary, I thought, to set the foundation for everything else that will come next. For tonight, you'll be serving a stuffed pork loin with an onion and applesauce and your choice of sides. In my house, that choice of sides is going to be corn on the cob and fried potatoes, both summertime favorites for my wife and I. It'll be easy and fun, and you too will be cooking at home like a chef. Stuffed pork was a favorite menu item in our restaurant, and it might be for your family as well. Stuffed pork is a piece of pork loin which has been cut to lay flat. It's filled with the stuffing, rolled together, tied up, and roasted in the oven. It'll be finished with an apple and onion sauce. Now, this is not an applesauce, but a blended sauce meant to supplement the pork. It'll bring a lot of flavor to the party. As I've mentioned in my other videos, the keys to success in the kitchen are planning, preparation, and execution. Good planning and preparation will lead you to a good execution. Okay, that's enough of that. Let's get to it. We have a recipe to cook. There are three primary ingredients for this recipe: a piece of pork loin, a sauce, and a stuffing. Up on the screen are the ingredient list for the stuffing and the sauce. Stuffing on the left, sauce on the right. Here, understanding the process steps and the order in which they must fall, that's the primary role of planning. Many recipes have interlaced steps and dependencies just like this. Okay, let's focus on the stuffing. As you can see from the list, there is one primary ingredient, a stuffing mix, and four enhancement ingredients: celery, onion, mushroom, and cranberries. And yes, I'm using an off-the-shelf stuffing mix. I know that doesn't sound like a restaurant thing to do, but you might be surprised. And here at home, this is definitely the better and faster choice. Now, in this situation, from a taste perspective, there's no difference. That's not always true, of course, but in this case it is. I like the box because it's cheap and it doesn't have a bunch of preservatives and chemicals in it. It's pretty clean in that regard, and it's less money than buying the herbs and bread and making it myself. The other thing of note is the chicken stock. Here too, I'll use an off-the-shelf store purchase. In the restaurant, we made our own, of course, but we also had whole, fresh chickens to break down every week. Here at home, I don't have that. So on the balance, the purchase winds up being the less expensive route. But there is a difference to be aware of. The store version is saltier. Do yourself, your family, and friends a favor, and be sure to read the label and purchase the one with a low salt, or at least the least salt that you can get. Now let's look at those sauce ingredients. Here we see three primary ingredients: apple, onion, and mushroom. For the recipe, I prefer a Granny Smith apple for this one. You could also use a Red Delicious if you prefer. Both will impart flavor very well. Just be aware that not all apples will work. I prefer the Granny Smith here. The spices are standard and easy to find if you don't already have them in your spice rack: ground tarragon, marjoram, and thyme. The cornstarch will be mixed with cold water and used as a thickener for the sauce. The next set of ingredients to mention is the pork loin itself and the two side dishes we'll be serving with it. Tonight I'll be preparing corn on the cob and fried potatoes to go along with the stuffed pork. Now it's time to get in the actual prep work and get that done. Back on the screen are the recipes for the stuffing and the sauce. The primary preparation work comes in the first three steps. For the sake of time in this video, I'll be briefly showing those steps, but not in detail. Please feel free to review videos 2 and 3 if you need a little refresher on the techniques that we'll be using here. For the stuffing, we're going to fine dice the celery. I want to fine dice here because we don't want chunks of celery in the stuffing to detract from the texture of the pork. Then medium dice the onion. Next, thin slice the mushroom. There, that part's done. Up next, the sauce. Here again, we're going to go through steps A, B, and C before heading to the stove. And since the apple was not shown in the previous video, here is its dicing method. Peel the apple using either a knife or a peeler. Cut down the cheek at each quarter turn of the apple. Thin slice these pieces. Then fine chop the lot. I want this to expose as much apple surface as possible to infuse the greatest amount of flavor into the sauce. I've completed the prep work for both the stuffing and the sauce. You can see them here. A fine diced apple, a fine diced onion, a fine diced mushroom. For the stuffing, sliced mushroom, chopped celery, and medium diced onion. It took me just under 10 minutes to prepare these things. They go pretty quickly, but if you're new to it, for your meal plan, allocate a little more time for yourself. Now I'm going to turn my attention over to prepping the corn for our side dish. There are a lot of ways to cook corn. The method I prefer is wrapping it in foil with butter and cooking it at high but indirect heat on the barbecue. 20 minutes and it will be tender, juicy, and delicious. Here's a quick and easy method that I follow. Put down a layer of butter. Add the corn, giving it a couple turns if you like. Fold the foil over, then fold in the ends, and continue to roll it tight to complete. I'm just going to take a minute now and finish these other 3. Now it's time to start cooking. For equipment, we're going to need 2 saucepans and a sauté skillet. Here for the purpose of the video, I'll do the stuffing in 1 saucepan, and I'm going to start the sauce in the skillet. This will keep the 2 items visually separate on the video. Normally, you'd start both in the saucepan. Here at the stove, I've assembled everything I need for this stage of the cook. This is part of my mise en place. Everything in place, including the pots, pans, and spatulas, ready for the cook. I'll begin with the stuffing. In a saucepan at medium plus heat, about number 6 on the dial, add 2 tablespoons of oil and 2 tablespoons of butter. Our flavor interest is in the butter. We use the oil to keep the butter from burning. When melted, add the celery. Let those melt together. Cook 1 minute. Give it a stir occasionally to prevent sticking and burning. Add that pinch of salt and the fresh ground pepper at this time. Add the onion. Cook another minute or so, or until the onions just start to lose their bright white color. While those vegetables are cooking, I'll start the cook for the sauce. I'm going to set the heat for the skillet to medium plus, again, number 6 on the dial, and add 2 tablespoons of oil. My onions are going to go in first. Stir it a bit and cook 1 minute. Add the apple. Stir to mix. And don't forget to check on the vegetables for the stuffing. This is looking pretty good. The onions are just turning translucent. It's time to add the mushrooms. I'm going to stir these in, then let them cook down. In the meantime, back to the sauce. These are looking pretty good. At this point, add 2 tablespoons of butter, a pinch of salt, and ground pepper. This is ready to put the mushrooms in now and continue that process. We'll let it cook for another minute or so, and then they'll go into the saucepan and we'll add our liquid. For the sauce, we don't need to cook them in the skillet very long. We're actually going to steep and impart their flavor in a liquid. What we want is for the heat to start breaking down the fibers within them so that they steep faster and impart more flavor into the liquid. If you have the liquid too soon, it'll take a longer time to boil them in order to reach that same point. So we cook them a little first. Okay, this is ready for the liquid. The box recipe calls for using water here. I'm going to use chicken stock. It'll give it a deeper, richer flavor. In that goes. In addition, I'm going to reduce the amount of liquid I use here to 1 1/4 cups. This will keep the stuffing slightly drier. And a half a stick of butter. And we'll just bring this to a boil. Okay, this is ready for the breadcrumbs. In they go. We give it a quick stir. Take it off the heat, put a lid on it, set a timer for 5 minutes. While that's infusing, we go back to the sauce. Our sauce vegetables are now ready for liquid. I'm going to transfer this into the saucepan, add our liquids, add our seasoning, and then turn down the heat slightly and let it reduce. Add in 2 1/4 cups of chicken stock and 1 cup of a sweet white wine. Now this is where you can really influence the taste of this sauce. You could use a Chardonnay if you wanted something a little more on the sharper, savory side. However, this is a sweet sauce for the pork, so I'm using a Pinot Grigio, a flavor that works very well with this sauce. We want to reduce this to just a little less than halfway. That should be perfect. It needs to be at a slow rolling boil in an uncovered pan for reduction. While the stuffing is steeping and the sauce is reducing, now's the time to soften the cranberries. In the skillet, over medium plus heat, add the cranberries and a splash of chicken stock. Let that boil away, stirring occasionally to prevent sticking. The steam will soften them. While that's working, I just want to have a word about reductions. A reduction is an evaporation of the liquid. That process concentrates the flavor, and it will do that even if it's a flavor you don't want, like salt. The experience will teach you how far you can go with your reduction. The rule of thumb is no more than half, although there are exceptions, of course. Once the water has evaporated from the skillet, remove it from the heat and set aside until the stuffing has completed steeping. When it has, mix the cranberries with the stuffing. Okay, well that was easy, wasn't it? Here are the items we're going to need for this next step in our preparation. We'll need a mallet, some plastic wrap, and some string to tie up the roll. And of course, we'll need the pork roll. I trimmed this from a full pork loin in video number 3. Here, it's already been cut to lay flat. Very briefly, here's a quick review from video number 3. Start at the leading edge, about a 1/2 inch down, and make a slice from end to end. Lift that up and make another one right behind it. Then keep going until you've worked your way all the way to the back. Once you come to the back, lift it up, turn it, and then continue cutting, as if you're just unrolling it. Continue that until you've reached the end. And there you go. It does take a little practice to get this down. Don't worry if you make a mistake here. We're going to pound it all out now and even it out. On a stabilized surface, under 2 sheets of plastic, give it a whack using the flat side of the mallet. You don't need to apply a lot of pressure here, just enough to break down the muscle and move the meat around. Use the mallet to move and reshape the thicker sections, making them more even with the others. This will help with even cooking of the roll. Okay, I'm not sure if you can see it in the video, but I've pounded the higher center out, creating a little depression in the middle. Now I'm going to work on the 2 sides and try to make it as even as I can. While doing this, remember to keep an eye on the sauce. Give it a check and a stir occasionally. Don't let it burn or over-reduce. But if for some reason it has over-reduced, you can recover from that by adding a mixture of more wine and water, or just water, but not wine alone, and no more chicken stock. You likely have enough salt in this already and don't need to add any more. Give it a taste after the addition and see what you think. This is the point to adjust that seasoning. Well, I think our pork roll is ready. It's mostly even all the way across. Now we'll add the stuffing. We're going to put the stuffing down the middle of the pork. Be generous, but don't overdo it. The stuffing is there to supplement the pork, not to take over the flavor. Start in the middle and spread it towards the edges, but don't take it all the way to the edge. This will keep it from falling out when we roll it up. A layer about 3/4 of an inch thick should be perfect. Now we're going to roll it up. Starting in this one end, we just roll it over. And there we are. Now we tie it off. You can use a cooking string for this. I happen to have these stretchy cords left over from another cooking demo. They'll work just fine and are easy to use. Tie off one end, like you see here, to keep the stuffing from falling out. Then do the same to the other end. I'm going to put another tie in the middle to make sure I hold the shape. And there we have it, prepared and ready to go. Time to get back to that sauce. The sauce is reduced to almost half, which is just where I'd like it to be, and the seasoning is just right. Nothing needs to be added. I've taken it off the heat and set it to the side while I come back and season the pork. I'm just going to use a plain salt and pepper on the pork. Spray it with an oil coating first so the seasoning will stick. I'm using Pam, and that's it. You can add other seasonings here as well, but keep in mind they may burn during the browning step. Okay, we're making good progress. The pork is now ready to be browned in a skillet. On the stove, hot skillet, 3 tablespoons of oil. In goes the pork. Just about 30 seconds on each side. The purpose here is to caramelize the outside of the pork. This is not a necessary step. Many people skip this step and just put it right in the oven and roast it. But if you want to cook like a chef, you'll brown the meat first. You want that caramelized coating on the outside. That's where that real depth of flavor comes from. Don't skip this step. And don't burn it. Brown it. That's the goal. With that done, it's off to the oven. Now don't be too surprised at the oven I use. The one I put on the counter here is one I use all the time. It does have a fancy name for it, but in reality, it's a forced fan toaster oven, a smaller version of the commercial one I used in the restaurant. Since I'm cooking for just 2 this evening, there's no reason to turn on the big oven and waste that electricity. So, to be a little conservative, I do it in my toaster oven. It'll come out just exactly the same. I have this set at 350 degrees, force fan on. We'll set this for 20 minutes, and then give it a check. With the pork in the oven, it's time to put the corn on the barbecue. That should take about 20 minutes as well. They should both be coming done about the same time. Well, we're coming pretty close now. The finish line is in sight, as they say. We have just a couple things left to do. One of those is to finish off our sauce. There's a couple steps to doing that, and the first is to separate the liquid in our sauce. I'm going to use just a small bowl and a strainer. Pour this in, and then use the back of your spatula to press it to squeeze out the remaining liquid. Once that's done, the liquid goes back into the pan, and we'll just set that over on the stove. Next, we make up our cornstarch mix. We don't need very much of this mix. 1 heaping tablespoon of cornstarch will do it. Mix that with cold water. You must use cold water here. If you use anything hot, the cornstarch will swell and seize immediately. This mix is very thin, almost like milk. Now back over to the stove. I've got the sauce heating up again. Cornstarch reacts at around the 190 to 200 degree Fahrenheit range. I brought this to a boil. Now I'm just going to reduce the heat a little bit. It's plenty hot. You'll want to go slow with this. Cornstarch can thicken a sauce quicker than you might believe. 1 spoonful at a time. Put it in, stir it, give it a moment to see how it reacts, and then if you need more, add more. We want the consistency of the sauce, not a gravy, so not too much. This is coming pretty close. We'll give it a test. The test is to see if it coats the back of the spoon, and when you swipe your finger across it, it doesn't run. That's exactly what we have. Perfect. We'll set this to the side. Okay, with that done, it's time to check on our pork. We need to give it a turn in the oven and check the temperature. This is domestic pork, so we want this to come to 145 at a minimum. Now if this were wild, you'd want to take that to 165 and no less. And we're at 104 right at the moment. We have about 10 minutes to go. And here's my second side dish, fried potato. I had some potato left over from a previous demo. We're just going to give that a quick fry. It'll be a good accompaniment for tonight's meal. Be sure to season the potatoes. Salt, pepper at a minimum. Other seasonings if you wish to give it a different flavor. But be sure to season the potatoes. And here we are, out of the oven at 145 degrees. It looks good, it smells good. It's going to be a great meal tonight. I'm going to let it rest for 5 minutes while I gather the rest of my items together for plating. And here we go. I've removed the holding string. Now it's time to give it its first cut and see what it looks like inside. Slice gently and slowly. You don't want to tear it apart. That's beautiful. Now it's time for plating. We start with 1 cob of corn, 3 slices of the stuffed pork, about 3 ounces of potatoes, and about 2 ladles of the sauce. Now your family may want more sauce than that. You can always take it to them. But here we go. Presenting stuffed pork loin with side dish. A perfect meal for this evening. Well, there we have it. Up on the screen are the actual times I used to prepare this meal. Some things were done in parallel, others were done sequentially. I pointed that out on the video. Well, thank you very much for watching. It is truly appreciated. Until next time.